There was an Oregon man who was praying, and he was praying for universal peace and a world that worked for all. And suddenly, as he was praying, the clouds parted and he heard this booming voice saying, "Because you're so selflessly praying for universal peace and a world that works for all, I'm going to grant you one wish." It was God. And the man said, "Well, if I can have one wish, I would like you to build a highway to Hawaii." And God said, "Well, that's very materialistic of you. Think of the logistics of that request. Think of how difficult that would be to go to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, all the concrete that it would require, and that's a very materialistic request. Why don't you think about it and spend some time contemplating and think of a wish that is more worthy of glorifying me?" And so the man thought about it for a while, and he came back and said, "I got it. Let's have peace among everyone in the world. Let's have a place that works for everyone." And God thought, and he said, "How many lanes would you like on that bridge?" Because what's easier? Building a bridge to Hawaii, which sounds really nice about now, or having a world that works for everyone, free of violence. You know, it's much easier for us to react in fear than to let life unfold. And this snowstorm that we have here in Colorado right now is playing itself out, this big snowstorm. I was finding myself this morning not being at peace, feeling all these thoughts in my head working themselves into a storm in my mind. And I had to say, "Peace, be still. Peace, be still," to the thoughts. Calm those storms within and try something different this morning. Record from our home, and with the hard work and intelligence of my husband Kevin, the cameraman, one of the cameramen, we're able to do this morning. So we are grateful for that. And I share that storm within, those thoughts that are sometimes violent in our own minds, because this morning I want to talk about Season for Nonviolence. It's an international educational grassroots campaign dedicated to promoting nonviolence as a powerful way to heal and transform our world, transform our lives. It was started by the Association for Global New Thought in 1998, and it runs for 64 days from January 30th to April 4th. January 30th being the anniversary of the assassination of Gandhi, and April 4th being the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Nonviolence is something that we need to practice. We need to bring it into our conscious awareness that there's another way to think about our world, to think about our conflicts, to think about people who we may not get along with. And there's a word that goes back 4,000 years called ahimsa. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word, and it comes from Buddhism and Hinduism and Jainism. And it's most important in Jainism, which is an ancient Indian religion, still practiced today. Ahimsa, meaning no injury, no harm, nonviolence. And those that practice Jainism take a vow that they will practice ahimsa to stop the cycle of birth, death, and life, or birth, life, and death, reincarnation. It's called samsara in Buddhism or in Hinduism. And it is this constant cycle that we find ourselves on, that we want to get off that wheel. And the way to get off that wheel is a relentless pursuit of truth and nonviolence. 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years later from when this was started with the Vedas, ahimsa, we have Jesus, who is known for his nonviolent ways of life. He says in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 43 to 48, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Now, that's quite a tall order, but it is doable. And being perfect, there wasn't a Aramaic word for that or Greek word for that when the gospel was written, when it was transcribed. Perfect in that time would have meant something more like not flawless, but whole, complete. Be all encompassing in love as Spirit is. Be all compassionate. Be all loving. Never cease in loving everyone, loving ourselves. And I love that scripture because the enemy is not necessarily somebody out in our world. It could be the enemy within us. Those thoughts where we put ourselves down. That part of ourselves that we have trouble accepting. And what happens when we don't accept our whole selves is we then recognize those parts of ourselves that we don't like in other people. And that's when we are more susceptible to acts of violence. We need to accept all ourselves, love all ourselves, so that we may be more accepting and loving of everyone else. But it's human nature, or seems to be human nature, to strike back, to react to violence with violence. This has been our way for thousands of years. When will it end? I think only when it starts within each one of us. When we say, "Peace, be still," to thoughts of anger, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of violence. When we break open our hearts to ahimsa, nonviolence. I found a trailer of a movie that I was going to show you this morning. Obviously, we don't have that capability here. But it's the trailer of a movie that hasn't yet made its U.S. debut. It will this summer. But it's a great movie, or looks like a great movie, to show us all the ways that nonviolence has worked in recent times. It shows Gandhi, it shows Martin Luther King Jr., it shows many people who have protested in nonviolent ways and the social changes that have been brought about to make life better for all. The movie is called Ahimsa, The Power of the Powerless. We'll have the trailer link in our update this Thursday so you can watch it. But our power comes from knowing our own divinity, from knowing that divinity within, knowing our oneness with each other. And only through love can nonviolence be expressed within ourselves and with other others. We need to break open our hearts to ahimsa. Allow that love to flow. Whenever we're in a state of anger or thoughts of violence, we cut off that flow of love. We no longer feel it, receive it. It's always there, but we've cut off the flow. We have to watch our thoughts, especially when we're in despair, when we see injustice in the world, when we see violence on news media. We need to practice to cleanse our consciousness. We've been talking about the 7 living words from our Unity booklet, Renew and Release and Renew. And this week, the living word is truth. It comes from the words that Jesus said on the cross when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, these words show us Jesus' humanity, his despair in his suffering. I read another piece from Eric Butterworth that said that another translation of that should have been, my God, for this was I kept. For this suffering may I transform. The truth is that we have this ability to transform. We have this ability to transform our lives, to transform our culture, to bring about change, to stop the violence, to allow peace, be still. But our culture has practiced violence for many years. And we call it redemptive violence because we feel justified in the violence. We feel like we will be saved by violence. So when someone attacks us, we attack back and save ourselves. That's a myth. There's several articles that I found on the internet that Walter Wink wrote about the myth of redemptive violence. And this myth of redemptive violence dates back to Babylonian times. And the funny thing about it is that it doesn't appear to be a myth. It appears to work. It seems to work. But Walter Wink talks about how it goes back to our childhood even. When you look at the cartoons that we watched as kids and how there was always some kind of violence going on. He specifically talked about Popeye and Brutus and Olive Oyl, and how Brutus was always kidnapping Olive Oyl and beating up Popeye until Popeye had his spinach and became strong and powerful and got Olive Oyl back. But that's a myth that redemptive violence works. Evil is never conquered that way. We don't learn anything new from violence. We're not having crucial conversations. We're not trying to understand each other. Violence is not redemptive. It doesn't save. It destroys. And so we want to look at nonviolent, have a nonviolent practice, ahimsa, where our true power lies. It's much more difficult, much more challenging to be nonviolent when people are coming at us, maybe attacking us. But it displays our power. It displays our strength. And that love conquers all. And it begins in the hearts of each of us. I love this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, which says, "The essence of nonviolence is love. Out of love and the willingness to act selflessly, strategies, tactics, and techniques for a nonviolent struggle arise naturally. Nonviolence is not a dogma, it's a process. And we need this constant process to train our minds to be still, to break open our hearts to ahimsa. There was a Pew research done in 2019 that said that using FBI files that really violence has gone down dramatically since World War II. But people's perception of the violence has increased. That people's perception thinks there has been more violence. Maybe that's what we're focusing on. Maybe due to media coverage, but we're more tuned into the media. What are we focusing our attention on? And what process can we use to bring about more nonviolence in our lives? I watched a video yesterday on YouTube. I'll put the link in the update this week. It's called Dialogue at Washington High. It was filmed on May 24th, 2006 at Washington High School in Fremont, California. The 10th grade history class. And the teacher decided to bring in the Jewish-Palestinian living room dialogue. She brought in these people into her classroom to demonstrate how to have a conversation among people who are presumably enemies. Elias and Miriam. Elias was a Palestinian Catholic who immigrated to the US in the 50s. And Miriam was a Jew whose father was a Holocaust survivor. Now, these two people have a long history. Their religions have a long history. Their cultures have a long history of violence between them. But in the video, we watch them dialogue and tell their stories. And we come to learn that they have learned to become friends, that they have learned to understand each other, to see the similarities between them rather than the differences. And knowing that those differences that they saw are only opinions, not right or wrong, not truth or untruth, but opinions. So then the children get a chance to practice, the 10th graders. They're instructed to pair up with someone that they think they're different from. Maybe somebody that they don't like or somebody that they haven't gotten along with. And they're to spend 10 minutes, one person telling their story with no interruptions. And then 5 minutes with the other being allowed to ask questions. Tell me more about this part of your life. I'm interested in this. And then after 15 minutes, reversing the roles. So in only a half an hour, two people who maybe didn't really like each other or didn't know each other had an opportunity to share their story. And then in the video, we hear from the kids how it changed them, how they woke up to each other's stories. One girl said that she picked someone that she had been mean to for a long time. And she said she felt ashamed of her past behavior. But she has a better understanding of her partner. And she vowed to be different. And one of the girls suggested that this be not a one-time thing, but have a dialogue group, a dialogue club, where they could do this on a regular basis. Get to know everyone in the school. Have a better high school experience. Establish a better community. It's really quite touching to see them connect in this heartfelt way, this nonviolent way. The process of social change starts with an awareness and a willingness to listen to another person. And then an adoption of an idea And when there's just 5% adoption among the population, it's embedded. And as that grows, when it gets to 20%, it's unstoppable. What if we had a process of nonviolence? It starts with each one of us. It starts in our own hearts. When we can realize the true power is within us. My white stone this year, I had a real hard time hearing the word. My mind wanted several different words, and then my heart, a couple days after our white stone ceremony, came up, heard, was guided to a word, and that word was power. Not power from a worldly sense, not power in my position at Columbine, but power within. Recognizing that divinity, that essence within, taking dominion of my thoughts, especially when I put myself down. Knowing that I am a child of God and acknowledging that. Even when, and especially when, I feel maybe attacked or angry. This last year has given me many opportunities to practice. It's not easy to take this road. Often people say they can't help but act with anger when someone attacks them, but it's in a split second that we decide how we're going to react. This whole thought process occurs within 0.6 of a second, where we get attacked, we judge it based on past experiences, emotions arise from that judgment, and then we react. We need to stay aware of this process in order to cultivate the strength to choose love instead of violence. That's where our power lies. In that split-second response. When we turn the other cheek and respond from love. Eric Butterworth says in Discover the Power Within You, love your enemy. Not because he is especially deserving of your love, but because when he causes you resistance, you are not acting the part of your divinity. And the power that goes with your divinity is only yours when you act the part. Do you want more peace? In what areas of your life are you not acting the part of your divinity? Are you willing to embrace a practice of ahimsa? Gandhi says, love is the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable. It takes humility because it's impossible to be nonviolent if we're feeling superior or prideful, which are qualities of the ego. And they result in judging others by our standards. With judgment comes violence. Nonviolence is a quality of the heart. It requires love of self and love of others. It requires us to face violence with love. It requires us to express from our divinity. And since we're spiritual beings, nonviolence is our true essence. We need only to awaken it and break open our hearts to ahimsa. I want to lead us into a meditation, and for this meditation, I'm using one of Association for Global New Thought's 64 meditations for Season for Nonviolence. I'm using their affirmative practice from day 14. And allow yourself to gently close your eyes as I read these words. Today, I will meditate on how love can be a more important force in my life. Today, I will approach each interaction with love and the humility to know that there is no right or wrong, only opinions expressed violently or non-violently. This is the path of non-violence. Let the peace be within you. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. We're going to hold those words in a moment of stillness.